Hi, everybody. My name is Sheri Grunska, and this is the Horse Barn Management Show. And if you have questions about boarding horses, running a boarding horse stable, starting a horse business, all of it, building, making money at it, if you're losing money, all those things we talk about here. And today's podcast is brought to you by Pro Barn Management. And I hope you check it out. It's probarnmanagement.com, and this is the Horse Barn Management Show on YouTube. And we're here to help you. And if you have questions, please write them below. Let us know you like this podcast, and we're going to keep doing them. And my goal is to hopefully help as many people as I can navigate through everything horse boarding. Because I've done it for almost 20 years now. And my husband and I made so many mistakes, especially me, because I was the one dealing with the clients and making more of the decisions. He was the backbone of the business, fixing things, building things, and just the overall care of how the farm should go. And we made a lot of mistakes, and thank goodness some of those days are behind us. We still learn. Sometimes things still catch me off guard, but now my goal is to help other people because it really isn't as easy as it sounds. Oh, I'm going to board a few horses, make a little money to pay for itself, and then I can have my horses and it won't cost me anything. And the reality is, if you figure in all your time and that you put into caring for other people's horses, sometimes you end up losing money. In fact, I would say the majority of people running boarding stables are barely breaking even, or they're losing money. We do it as a full-time job. This is what we do every day. We have right now we've downsized greatly over the years, and we're down to 32 horses, which is still crazy. And but we do it as a business, and so we are home. This is what we do. We love it, but it's hard. Even today, doing it after 20 years, we still have difficult days. For us, the biggest hurdle we go through is winter time. We are in Wisconsin, and it's now February 3rd. And I cannot believe what a change from years ago, because usually we have snow all the way through, and it's a little easier on the horses. We can navigate what we're doing. You do get a January thaw where then you have to deal with some melting snow and maybe some ice, but we can fix that. But boy, we've had just completely from 0 degrees, 5 degrees, snowstorms, 2 major snowstorms a couple of weeks ago, and now it's melting everywhere. And it's water has to go somewhere. It's always going to go to the lowest point. That's why it's so important to make sure your barn is up higher so that water doesn't go into your barn. But for us, what's happened, especially this week, I'll just give you a little update on what's going on at our barn. Because we had so much snow and now it's so warm, I think they're calling for up to 50 degrees by the end of this next week. Everything is melting so fast. The frost is coming out of the ground the same time. We have clay soil, which does not drain good to begin with. Our paddocks are just to a point now where we've kept the horses in a couple days because it's so deep. And my big concern is I don't want the horses hurting themselves. And there are stables in the area that have their horses out, and we could put the horses out, but we chose not to, just to get the paddocks to drain a little better and just let them kind of settle, because right now there's so much happening in the ground and above the ground and the temperature, and it just gets crazy. So we have had our horses in for a couple days, and this is one of those situations where it's so important to really make sure your clients understand how you're going to do things and how you're going to navigate through some of these murky days. Because if someone doesn't understand how you do things, they might become very frustrated very quickly that their horse isn't outside. And it's what they don't understand is it's not only frustrating for them, it's probably more so for us because it cost us more money in bedding. The labor is harder because the stalls are, wow, really dirty. And we have to top off the water buckets more. It's a lot more work for us all the way around. So we don't do it to get out of work. It actually creates work for us. And which kind of goes into our subject that I'm going to talk about today is horse blanketing, the madness of horse blanketing at your boarding stable and how to kind of keep it at a level that you can handle, because I'll tell you right now, I talk to so many people, the horse blanketing is probably one of the most challenging parts when you're dealing with clients and what they want for the horses and what you really can physically navigate in a day, especially if a larger barn. So the weather's been crazy. I know it's crazy all over, but if you're in an area where you've had a lot of snow and now it's melting and you have water everywhere, you have to decide what you're going to do with those animals. And we've kept our horses in for a couple days, and our clients have been here for years and they know that's how we do it. I give them the option to put their horses out if they want to, but most of them have really seen when they go to walk out there how deep they sink down and the ground just needs to dry out a tad. So they've kept their horses in, and you know what? The horses do just fine. They'll be just fine. And I think it's the people sometimes that get a little bit more worked up. So that's kind of what's going on in our neck of the woods. If you have something going on down where you live, wherever you live, let us know some of the struggles you're going through with winter, with snow, with thawing, with mud. We have mud, and let us know what's going on there. People have asked me why we don't fix, in the past, people have asked why don't we fix our paddocks. And the thing that sometimes clients don't understand, it's not just an acre in your backyard. We have culverts, we have drain tiles, we have everything, but to fix some of this would cost, you know, who knows, 60, 70, 80, $100,000, which we don't have. So I tell them we don't have the money. It's just something that the horses deal with where they're in for a couple days, maybe a week during the springtime. And you know what? In the course of an entire year, it's okay. And the horses do fine. And the clients understand that. I mean, to fix something so massive with the amount of acres we have and the way the drainage works and the water flows, that is something we just don't have the money to do. And on top of it, when you have so much snow and then it's melting rapidly, it's just crazy to try and control all that. And that's the thing that people, sometimes city folks don't understand. If they're living in town and everything's draining nice and they have the culverts in town and cement, and it's hard for them to understand. And I'm not trying to bash anybody. I'm just trying to speak reality. So if you're having some issues at your place or you're struggling too, the struggle is real. You're not alone. But hopefully as you do it longer, it'll get easier. And some things you can fix with drain tiles and culverts, and sometimes you just have to let the water run, especially when you have so much snow melting. Anyways, okay, that's our week here at Vinland Stables. Right now, I thought it'd be really fun to talk about, and I don't know if it's exactly fun because it's a struggle for people, but it's interesting to talk about because the struggle's real. I thought we would talk about blanketing in the wintertime and how you navigate all that. I've talked about it in other podcasts, but I always get questions every winter because it really wears people out. And I want people who are running boarding stables to really hone in on this and figure out, okay, how do I want my stable to run? What kind of rules am I going to have? What am I going to offer for services when it comes to blanketing? And the first thing I want you to think about, especially if you're building, is are you going to have a heated barn or not? Because that's going to make a huge difference on how much blanketing you do. If you have a heated barn and the horses have to go outside and it's warm in the barn, frigid outside, you're going to be doing a lot more blanketing. If you have a barn that is not heated, we do not have a heated barn. then when they go outside, it is so much easier. We don't have to switch blankets. And that is kind of nice. It's just the transition from the barn, because it's really cold, to outside, which is a little colder, is not enough to really have to switch blankets. So we don't have a problem with that, and the horses do just fine. So those are two things. Now, I thought we would kind of talk about this a little bit, because the biggest issue I have is people will offer blanketing included in the board. And we did too when we first opened. And you think, oh, how hard could it be? Putting on blankets, taking them off, And the thing was, this is the truth, my horses were never blanketed way back when we built. So I really had little experience with blanketing, and I just didn't process it all until we were knee deep into it. And I'm like, oh, wow, this is a lot of work when you have 20 horses that have blankets. So the thing you need to think about is, if you're going to do blanketing, are you going to charge a fee? And the reason being is because you're going to have, I always say time is money, and it's true when it comes to blanketing. You're going to have horses that come in all different types of blankets, and those horses could be difficult to blanket. They could, in some cases, make it very challenging for you to put the blanket on. All those steps add time to the day, and it's time that you could be doing something else. Some of the issues people have with blanketing, and if you have issues, write them down. Tell me if you can relate. I was really surprised at all the different views of blanketing and what people thought was appropriate for blankets. Through the years, I've had blankets that were not the right weight for the horse. So the horse was either too hot or shivering. I've had blankets that were not waterproof, and the horse got soaked through, and I had to switch blankets. Blankets that were way too small for the horse, and I had to tell the person that blanket didn't fit, and we were not going to put it on. I have broken straps in the front, the chest, on the belly. I've had people buy blankets. You think of all the blankets. People who have bought blankets, the kind that you lift over the head, those are well and nice if you have a horse that's not shy. But if you have a horse that's going to freak out every time you go to raise the blanket and put it over their head, it's a hassle. So that's something to think about. There are blankets out there that are single, they're triple layered. So you not only putting on one blanket, you're putting on two. I've had people put on sleazies under the blanket. Those have to come off when you're switching blankets sometimes. I've had people just put sleazies on thinking it'll keep the horse warm because they didn't know better. And I've had to say the horse can't go out in that. Hoodies. Face hoodies, I've had people do that. We don't even allow that anymore, but I've had nightmares where a horse had one and the eye sockets of the hoodie, of the face hoodie, just slid over and the horse couldn't see. Thank goodness that horse was extremely calm and did not just stood there, and I was able to switch it. Craziness of blanketing, so I want you to really think about that. If you're going to be doing blanketing every day, if you have to switch a blanket or pull a blanket because the owner did not come out and change it themselves and the horse is sweating because it's too hot, or if you have to put on a blanket because the horse is shivering, those are things that are going to happen. You will experience that sometime in your boarding stable career if you're blanketing. Muddy blankets, wet blankets, and dealing with all that. It's just a yuck part of the job. The only time it's ever fun is when the blanket is brand new on the very first day. And then it becomes kind of a mess. The other issue is when horses are playing with each other's blankets, especially geldings, not mares. Usually it's always geldings. And they're ripping each other's blankets. How do you deal with that with the clients? So first of all, yes, we charge for blanketing at our stable because I'm not going to do it for free because it's too time consuming. If you want to add that into the board rate, you can do that. But just you have to remember that you have to fit it in there enough so that you're definitely not losing money on your time. The other thing is the reason we charge a separate fee instead of actually including it in our board rate is because there's a majority of our horses that are not blanketed at all, and I didn't feel that the boarder should have to pay a higher rate for a service they're not going to ever use. So when you're setting up your board rates and you're itemizing or including services, you want to think about what kind of clientele you're going to have, because if you're going to have a 20 horse barn and you're going to have every one of those horses blanketed and they will always be blanketed, maybe they're clipped, maybe they're blanketed even in the summer, then yeah, you can have that fee added on as part of the actual service of what you offer at your stable. And there's nothing wrong with it, but you just want to make sure your time is included in all that goes with it. If you're a stable like mine where you have all kinds of people and you have half the people don't blanket at all and they never do, then I did it as kind of an a la carte kind of thing where it was a separate fee and they could decide what they wanted to do. And if they wanted to pay the extra fee, that's up to them. If they don't, or if they want to ask a friend to help them and they kind of buddy up and do the blanketing, that's perfectly fine. I would rather do it that way, and it's one less job I have to do if they don't want to pay and they want to have someone else do it. Because if the truth be told, I really don't want to do blanketing. And it's just a hassle. It's very hard in the winter, in the spring when everything's muddy or it's really cold. And you might even have people that want to put fly sheets on, which to me would fall in that category. Anything that they're going to put on during the day, if they want a sheet on so the horse doesn't fade in the sun. All these things to me are part of that whole blanketing section. So I think the biggest thing I can tell you from this, the most important thing is when you have people come for a tour at your stable, you need to really be honest about how you do this. And you need to be honest about if you charge, if it's included, what's included. And that way there's no surprises for them and everybody's happy and they settle in, or maybe later on they decide they want to go somewhere else. That's fine. But the idea is not to have a lot of turnover. So if you're really open and honest with them about what you're going to offer, what it's going to cost them, and this is how you do it, then you'll have less headache in the future. I had someone contact me and they said they had a boarder who was a great boarder. She paid her board all the time, really not too much problems except for the blanketing, because she had exact temperatures that she wanted the blankets changed. So if she had one blanket on and at 46 degrees she wanted a blanket switched, you could be going out and doing blanketing in the middle of the day, changing blankets. Do you want to do that? You have to really think it through. Sometimes the weather changes so drastically that you're forced to because it gets too hot and you're either pulling blankets or people are switching them. But if the temperatures are staying kind of even keel, a degree or two is not going to make a difference. But this woman got very angry because she had exact temperatures that she wanted her horse's blanket changed, and the owner of the stable didn't know how to navigate this and really didn't know how to talk through because she had never experienced a client like this before. And, it could have been that it was a windy day. I mean, sometimes they say the temperature is going to be one thing, it never reaches that, or it's really windy out, so the air is still cold. There's a lot that goes into it. It also depends on the horse and what kind of coat they have and if they've been clipped or not. And she was in tears because this woman had reamed her out. So, is it always going to be perfect? Of course not. But at some point, it's okay. It might be okay to say, this might not be the boarding stable for you, to a client that is that demanding. And if that's the case, then they probably need to go on to a barn that maybe is better equipped or has more employees to handle all these blanket changes. if you don't want to do it. And that's okay, because you can't please everybody, and you shouldn't, you just shouldn't try. You should just do what you can do at your stable and do the best job you can. And if you have a difficult difficult client that is just really demanding, you have to say to yourself at some point, is it really worth my time? Because life's too short. and no disrespect, but it's really true. The client isn't always right. We try our best to please them, keep their horses happy, but you can't do it all. And, as the longer I've been doing it, I realized, I don't want to be running out in the middle of the day all the time. Or, when you work such a long day, our day starts at 5:30 in the morning. I'm usually up around 3:30 or 4 before I head outside. I have lots of stuff to do, and the day really ends when the barn closes at night. It's even a longer day for my husband. So I try to get you really to think about it, and it's okay to say this might not be the right stable for you, and to just let them go and find the right clients for what you want. If you're going to have a show barn, you're probably going to have more demands as far as blanketing, especially if horses are clipped. And you need to be compensated for that. And so I want you to think about the compensation. What is it worth it to you? Because if you feel $40 a month is a good price, if you feel you don't need to charge, I think you'll change your mind on that down the road. But if you're going to include it in your board, go ahead and do it, because having a show barn is awesome. We had lots of horses that were shown when my kids were showing, and definitely a lot more things that I did as far as blanketing, because we had a lot of horses that were clipped. And it made a difference, especially here in Wisconsin where the weather is so cold. So you really want to navigate all that. And just remember, the bottom line is it's your barn. You got to do what's best for you and your family and your mental well-being. I mean, you really do. So be honest to people that are checking out your place. Tell them the truth. If they still want to come, then there's a good chance that it's going to be a really good fit. Otherwise, they will say, okay, thank you, and they'll move on. And that's okay, because the right people will come. People talk, and they talk about boarding stables in the area, and they'll say, hey, they don't offer this at Vinland or whatever. It's just worth being really honest to people. Also, the big thing is I'm really strict about broken straps on a blanket. If a blanket is ill-fitting or the straps are broken, they have to fix it. I'm not going to put a horse outside or deal with broken straps where I come out and the horse is, the blanket's falling off of them. I'm not going to do it. So if you need to kind of toughen up there a little bit, you need to tell them to get a second blanket, fix the first one. But, the horse isn't going to sit in a stall because they won't fix a blanket for a week. Those are things that you might be dealing with. The other thing that happens, and it happens at every boarding stable where you have herd turnout, is if you have a bunch of geldings together and they have blankets, I guarantee you they're going to start pulling on each other's blankets, and you're going to have ripped blankets eventually. I honestly have not seen a blanket that is horse proof. At some point, they all kind of break down. Horses will grab and play tug of war with each other's blankets. I've seen blankets pulled over the horse's head. I've seen blankets pulled off. I've seen straps broken. And then you have to trounce out there, and sometimes you're in the snow, sometimes you're in the mud, and you're dragging this blanket out, and the horse is looking at you like, hey, I love it. I don't have that blanket on me. The biggest problem isn't the horses, though. It's the people, the clients, and how you're going to navigate that. The way I do it here is, and this is just the way I do it, whether you don't have to do it this way, is when someone is going to blanket, they understand they blanket at their own risk. If horses are pulling on blankets and they're destroying a blanket and that client is upset, then they have an option. They have an option to go in private turnout and pay for that, or they can go to a barn that works better for them. I cannot be moving horses from herds every single time two geldings are pulling on each other's blankets and ripping them. I just can't do it. And it upsets the herds. Then you're doing the whole hierarchy thing again, where horses are trying to figure out who's on top, and the chances of a horse getting hurt is greater. So if someone is going to get upset and they're trying to put the blame on the other person's horse, I sometimes have to get a little bit strong on that and just say, no, this is animal behavior. It has nothing to do with the horse. These are horses that are playing. They're out there roughhousing, and you have a choice. You either don't blanket, private turnout, or, if they need to, you hope they don't go, but find a different barn. But I'm not going to move horses because the blankets are getting ripped up. It's just part of geldings, especially with them playing. And we don't have too many geldings that do that, but we have a couple right now. They'll pull on each other's blankets. I've seen them pulling to the point where the straps are ripping, the blanket is over their head, and it's just crazy. And in that situation, the lady who owned the horses, she owned both horses, and there were her horses doing it to each other. So she just decided, you know what, I'm pulling the blankets. And that's what she did. And it's honestly, it's kind of one of those things where you're dealing with all kinds of clients, and you're going to have to navigate. And the only way to get better at it, I don't know if we ever say we're good at it, but you kind of learn you kind of can see the storm clouds brewing, and you kind of see it coming, is just through experience. And that is something that just takes time. But what I want to tell you is you're not alone. Every single person who's ever run a boarding stable has dealt with this, especially if it comes to blanketing. And it can be frustrating, but it is part of the territory. And unless you have every single horse in private turnout, you're going to have blankets sometimes being pulled on, sometimes tore. It just depends on the horses. And if you want to move horses, you surely can. I don't want to do that because I know they get along great. It's just something, oh, I have a toy on me, I'm going to pull at it. And some horses will pull on their own blankets too. We have one horse who hates wearing blankets, and he'll put his head down and he'll just pull on the front as much as he can. He'll pull on it until eventually the strap breaks. And the owner he gets so frustrated, but it's not his fault. It's not, the horse just does it, and he's bought much more durable blankets, and that doesn't happen anymore. Sometimes the lining of the blanket gets a little ripped, but for the most part, the blanket stays intact, and his own horse is doing it to himself. So that is kind of the craziness of blanketing. It is, it's really one of I think, the most difficult things of horse boarding. But if I could just say again, just remember your time is worth something. Don't do it for free, because one day you will regret it. You'll be burnt out, and you'll say, why am I doing this? And it's taking me an extra hour to blanket all these 20 horses. If you take an extra hour and you times that times 5, and then eventually every day of the month, you're going to be losing a lot of money and a lot of time that is precious. And the biggest thing is time is precious, especially no matter what stage you're at in your life. It's really valuable, and you don't want to lose that time. And if you're going to have to do it, then you do it. I just think charging is perfectly fine. It's a normal practice, and it's okay to do it. Some barns don't do it, and that's their choice. But we've always done it. Well, we didn't do it at the beginning, but we learned real quick after the first couple of years. But we do it now. We don't have a problem with it. So that's kind of my talk about the craziness of blanketing. If you have questions and I missed something that you wanted to hear me talk about with blanketing, or you want me to answer, please type it down below. Let us know you like this podcast. Like I said before, two things. I'm going to do a plug. If you have any questions at all about horse boarding and how to set up your stable, please check out my book, A Step-by-Step Guide to Starting and Running a Successful Horse Boarding Business. I wrote this because I couldn't find any books that talked about navigating all this, and I didn't want to lose money. We had a huge mortgage, and I had a lot on the line. And I really, now my goal is to help other people. So this book talks about so much in here that'll help you set up your boarding stable. And remember, it's not, I'm not saying my way is the best way. You have to do what's best for you, but there are some things that you're just going to say, you know, I can't do this for free anymore, or I need to make this easier. And the bottom line is, it's not about the number of horses, because more horses isn't always better. It doesn't mean you're going to make that much more money. In fact, your job might become so hard that you're actually losing money, because you have to have employees and all that. So you really want to find the sweet spot in that. So if you're looking for a book, you can find those on Amazon. You can go to probarnmanagement.com. They are on Amazon in paperback and hardcover and ebook. I also have other books out there about horse boarding. And I also wanted to, I said the last podcast that I thought, I wrote a book a summer ago, and on the sixth day God created the horse. And since we're talking about barn management, I just thought the way barn management looks today is so much different than it has been for all the centuries on Earth. And I wanted to talk about some of the different things that people have done as far as the care for horses. When I did the research for it, I was just kind of blown away, and I thought, I had no idea. So I thought at the end of every podcast, I would just share a little bit out of the book, just to share some really fun, cool history and facts, and because it all relates to horse care and barn management. It just looks differently depending on the era and what was going on in the world. So I'm going to share a little bit out of this from today, and you can find this book also on Amazon. This was kind of a fun one, the first equine veterinarians, and I thought this was kind of a cool little history part that I found. And I'm not going to read the entire page, but actually the first equine veterinarians were not vets. They were farriers, which is just crazy. And the care of horses, people were still learning about horses even a couple hundred years ago and how to care for them. And there were many mistakes made. And I just thought it was so fascinating, because we are so lucky and blessed to have the knowledge we have. And a lot of reasons we have that knowledge is through the mistakes, unfortunately, of what people have done in the past. And, people were just trying to navigate and care for these animals because they used them every day. They didn't have vehicles. They didn't have trucks and all that. So they had to use the horse, and he was used for everything, including battle. So this one was kind of cool. It was called The First Equine Veterinarians. And I'm just going to read a part of this page. It says, fast forward a few thousand years, and on December 16th, 1776, General George Washington issued an order stating that a farrier be included on every roster for every new regiment for battle. Washington recommended that the farrier be responsible for the medical care required by cavalry horses, since they had medical knowledge of the horse's whole being. The farriers were more important back then because they were the ones, no hoof, no horse. They had to make sure the horses were moving and their feet were doing okay. They were so important. These appointed farriers were the first veterinarians in the U.S. Army, and I just thought that was so cool. And of course, there were mistakes made by some people who I think, who knows if it's pride, they're not willing to learn, who knows. But this part was very interesting. During the Civil War, the Army discovered the importance of veterinary care for the horses used in battle. Unfortunately, some of the officers didn't recognize the position of the veterinarian sergeant, and instead, due to complete stupidity and pride, gave each soldier a copy of the book titled Each Man is His Own Horse Doctor. The results were disastrous for the sick and injured horses, which led to the death of many horses. It was definitely a time of trial and error. Things began to change soon afterwards for the betterment of the horse. Equine veterinarians have come a long way with their knowledge about horses, and today's horses have never been cared for more by the doctors who treat them. And it's cool because it was actually the farrier that was the first equine vet. And, the other little tidbit in that book that I didn't read is early on, way early on too, um, during battle, a lot of these horses were clipped to keep their hair off their body because they had such a problem with mites and, all kinds of hair issues and skin issues. So they would shave these horses into battle. And unfortunately, they didn't have horse blankets, enough blankets for a lot of these horses, and they actually froze to death during those cold winters in wartime because they didn't realize, people just were not realizing, oh, if I take their hair off, they'll be just fine. So they'd shave them and the horses froze to death. And later on, they stopped that immediately because they were losing all their battle horses and they couldn't win a war without them. And they just were shaving their legs. And it's because there was a mite infestation. So, barn management, horse care, it's come a long ways. And, just praise God for the awesome veterinarians and farriers we have today that take care of our horses. And, they learned on the backs of a lot of those mistakes of people from way back then that were trying the best they could, except for the people that refused to acknowledge the veterinarians and tried to be a vet, their own vet. But that's a little history out of the book, and barn management has always been here. It just has looked a little different through the years, and I hope you enjoyed that. Anyways, if you have any questions, please ask, and we just want to wish you the best. Many blessings in your horse business, and check out probarnmanagement.com. And remember, this is the Horse Barn Management Show, and you can find us on YouTube. And we thank you, and we'll see you again in a week or two. God bless. Thank you.